Welcome to the OHL Community Storytelling Project. This video will discuss what happens after the interview. You've chosen a narrator, obtained informed consent, prepared your questions, and recorded the interview. You have to produce a transcript of the recording, which was covered in a separate video, but what else is there to do after the interview? Depending on the project and your relationship with your narrator and their community, the post-interview period can cover a span of time from immediately after the interview to months or sometimes even years following the interview. So this video covers a range of topics from making backups of recordings to building long-term relationships with your narrator. After watching this video, viewers should be able to identify key post-interview steps, detect when follow-up questions or interviews are needed, set up and conduct a follow-up with the narrator, summarize why follow-up questions are used to elicit more details from the narrator, and recognize the importance of ongoing and clear communication with the narrator. Even though the recording will eventually be secured in a digital collection, making a backup of the recording after the interview is a priority in case the original is accidentally deleted or lost. You'll most likely have recorded the interview on a mobile device like an iPad or your smartphone. So as soon as possible after the interview, make a copy and save it to a different secure location, such as the project's external hard drive, a Google Drive, or the cloud. When in doubt, ask your project leader where you should save the original and the copy. Make sure you name the file appropriately so you can easily find it if something happens to the original. See the Digital Collections instructional material for more information on how to name files. If you are given original photographs or documents to digitize or copy for the archives, it's extremely important that you do this and return the material to your narrator without delay. If possible, it's advisable to ask your narrator for copies so you are not responsible for original documentation. Your narrator's contact information will most likely be stored in your phone or an electronic device, but it's a good idea to keep a non-digital contact log, for example, a notebook or a printout. This means the contact information is accessible even if your phone is lost or not working or internet access is unstable. If appropriate, you may also ask for contact information for people who are close to the narrator or related to their story. So you have another way to reach your narrator if for some reason they are taking a long time to respond when you contact them. This also helps you build a list of contacts for potential future projects. Another thing to do very soon after the interview is to communicate with your narrator. You will have already thanked them for their time at the end of the interview, but you should also check in again by email, in person, or by phone, depending on your relationship with your narrator and how they prefer to be contacted. Different things can be addressed in this communication, but most importantly, make sure to thank your narrator again for sharing their story. Depending on what seems appropriate, in this communication, you can also ask them if they have any questions or concerns. Reassure them that you are available to answer any questions they might have. Let them know what comes next. For example, often your next step is to produce a transcript of the recording, and it's a good idea to let your narrator know you'll be working on this. And explain that sometimes questions arise during the transcription process, and ask them if they are available for follow-up questions. Follow-ups are an important part of the post-interview process. Questions may arise after the interview, especially as you work on the transcription of the recording, and following up with the narrator is the best way to get answers. There are a variety of reasons you may need to follow up with your narrator, including asking the narrator to provide the correct spellings of names and places, clarify anything that may be confusing, give definitions or explanations of unfamiliar terms that were used, reflect on something they said or experienced in more depth, and elaborate on something they've said and provide details. Instead of setting up multiple meetings or sending a barrage of emails, it's better to compile a list of all the follow-up questions you have and address them in one meeting or communication with the narrator. If you feel you have many questions, it's possible you may want to set up a second interview. Sometimes the best stories come from subsequent interviews because the narrator has had time to reflect on what they've said in the previous interview, and you've already established a rapport with them. Remember to always check with your narrator to confirm they are willing to answer follow-up questions. They should not feel pressured, and it should be made clear that at any point in the process they can decline to answer further questions. If they agree, follow-ups can be done in person, on the phone, by email, in a video call, or by using a meeting platform such as Zoom. Ask your narrator how they would like to be contacted and try to accommodate their needs to the best of your ability. However the follow-up is conducted, ideally it is recorded, or, if done in writing, the correspondence is saved, as this material may also be archived or used in future projects. If you are using your phone or a platform such as Zoom, don't forget to record the meeting. Often follow-up questions are designed to invite the narrator to elaborate on what was said and provide details. Details are important in oral history interviews because they add interest, and they can also help clarify ideas. For an example, we will look at an interview done with Jose Garcia Sepulveda, a pastor who opened a crisis center from the back of his small church after Hurricane Maria. In his interview, Pastor Jose speaks about going door to door to provide supplies to people in need. We'll now listen to a part of his interview where he talks about the poverty he saw.
One of the things that this hurricane brought to light is how serious the social dilemma in the social dilemma on our island is at this point. How many people are living in poverty. We discovered people who were living in conditions that simply are not apt for any human being. We discovered these families and these people because of roads that were now clearer to our perception. We were able to access better some of these places because we intentionally walked down every road because we wanted to know if there was someone at the end of the road. And before that, no one was interested in knowing if there was anyone or any house at the end of the road. But now, because we wanted to make sure that everyone got a plate of food or a bag of groceries, we would be very intentional to walk down every road. And by doing that, we discovered that there were so many people living in isolated and remote areas in such poverty, in such inhumane conditions, and I'm not exaggerating by saying inhumane.
Throughout his interview, Pastor Jose speaks about poverty, need, and inhumane conditions, but these general terms do not leave the reader or listener with a clear image of what he has personally observed. So in our follow-up, we asked, can you describe something specific you saw or experienced that would illustrate the poverty you were witnessing? What Pastor Jose shared in the follow-up was eventually published in the book Mi Maria Surviving the Storm, Voices from Puerto Rico. In the following excerpt, we can see how Pastor Jose elaborates on his initial observations. Pastor Jose says, "We visited one house that was very dilapidated. It had hardly any paint on it and was slightly off its cement foundation. You could see through holes in the wooden panel walls. Inside, the floor seemed too weak to step on. The kitchen had a small metal sink and a few pots and dishes. They had a very old portable stove hooked up to a cylinder gas tank, and the walls were black, entirely covered in grease. The bathroom wasn't functional. The faucets were broken. The bedroom consisted of a very old mattress on the floor. Rodents, roaches, and insects roamed freely in and out of the house. In spite of all their poverty and need, the people who lived there offered us coffee." The details in the specific example that Pastor Jose gives of the people in that one house add interest to the story, creating a vivid image in the reader's mind. And perhaps more importantly, the details clarify what he means when he uses general terms like poverty, need, and inhumane conditions. After the follow-ups have been completed and all the material has been transcribed, narrators should be given the opportunity to correct mistakes and clarify anything they've said that might be confusing. Whenever possible, it's important to share the transcripts with the narrator so they can review and approve them before they're made available to the public. Remember, if there are substantial changes in the transcripts, for example, a section is removed because the narrator does not want that part of the interview archived, then the recording will also have to be edited to reflect those changes. It's also important to let the narrator know when their oral history has been archived and of any updates to the project. For example, inform the narrator if an excerpt of their interview has been used with their permission in a talk or publication, or if there are any changes to the archive. Also remember to invite narrators to any events that are happening that are related to the project, whether they be in person or online, and consider reaching out to them if possible future collaborative opportunities arise. Relationships are an important part of the oral history process. Communicating with the narrator after the interview helps to build trust and long-term relationships. Historically, people have had experiences of researchers, reporters, or organizations coming into their communities to take something from them, a quote, a story, a picture, etc., and then disappearing. This is sometimes referred to as the one-and-done mentality. In their guidelines for social justice oral history work, the Oral History Association notes that oral history is not a transactional experience in which an interviewee gives and an interviewer receives. In general, one-time, one-sided interactions do not benefit the narrator or their community, and therefore should be avoided. Even if you are working with someone you know well in your community, it's good to spend a little extra time nurturing your relationship with them. Often narrators have never shared their stories in this manner before, so the interview process can have an impact on them. Being intentional in your communication with your narrator can help develop and maintain a mutually beneficial relationship. Creating a post-interview checklist can be a great way to keep track of what you have to do after the interview. The post-interview time is an important part of the oral history process. You will be busy working on the transcription of the interview, but as we have seen here, there are also many other things to consider, from making backups of recordings to building long-term relationships with your narrator. This concludes our After the Interview video. Please check out the other videos in the OHL Community Storytelling Project.